Welcome to Muslims and Mental Health with Sister Heather, a groundbreaking program looking at mental health issues through the biopsychosocial spiritual paradigm.
Welcome to another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. Today we're going to be talking to our youth who identify as LGBT or T. And this is a two-part series that we'll be starting today. Within the Muslim community, there's been a rise in cases concerning youth identifying as LGBT or Q, and families they're not certain on how to navigate this issue or what they understand theologically, and their compassion and love for their loved ones has been muddled with not knowing which way to go on this issue. And a few months ago, I was speaking with a scholar, an American scholar, about the Caitlyn Jenner news media coverage. And the conversation was a great conversation. I had a lot of respect for the scholar because he was saying that as we consider these issues that haven't really been talked about thoroughly in our community, that we need to consider all aspects of the issue. So we need to have not just theologians and scholars at the table, but we need to also have psychologists, social workers, other people who would be key stakeholders in helping the youth who have, crises around these issues, how they will work through them. And so to that end, what our hope is today is to provide this aspect of that table sharing discussion and find out what it means to be LGBT or T, and how we can best help through compassion and understanding these youth in terms of what they are experiencing. We're also not going to get into the theological concepts in this show. We're going to stay in our lane in the world of psychology and therapy, mental health care, and try to psychoeducate everyone about the LGBT youth. One of the challenges of our community is that there really aren't words in our community that separate the identities of children who identify or have these tendencies or feelings. In the vocabulary that we use in Islam, it's more seen that there's individuals who are human beings who have tendencies or feelings, as opposed to our American landscape, where we have people actually have separate identities that are identified and labeled. And so that's part of the navigation of this process. We live in a social contract in America where not everyone is Muslim. And as Muslims, we believe that we hold people to the laws that they believe. And so with that frame, if you will, we're going to approach this and look at how other people experience life and some of those alternative ways of experiencing life that we might not be so familiar with. But I'm asking you to keep an open mind and to take into consideration with compassion what people are experiencing and how best we can navigate this so that we can support our youth into being the best that they can be. So with that, I'm so happy and honored to have Erica Rodriguez with us today. She is an MFT, a marriage and family therapist, who's currently working on her doctorate in clinical psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy. She's worked for 18 years in nonprofits, 10 years working with families, and 5 years strictly working with the LGBT youth. She has presented across the United States on systems of care and on the LGBT youth. So please join me in welcoming Erica. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course, I'm really happy to be here.
So I know this is a new topic for our community, but I'm so grateful that you are willing to share with us today. And I want to just start in by asking you if you can help us understand, what does it mean to identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or questioning?
Okay, wonderful. So first, I definitely want to tell you thank you, and thank you to anyone who's watching to be able to be open to the conversation of getting some knowledge regarding this topic. I think that the question is definitely a legitimate one because the first thing that we hear when we look at the community, the LGBT community, would be those letters. So the first thing to acknowledge is that we're looking at two different things. We're looking at orientation and we're looking at identity. So orientation would be something that someone's attracted to, who they have feelings of love towards, while identity is who someone feels they are. So when looking at LGBT, the L and the G stand for lesbian and gay. And lesbian and gay would be lesbian being a female, or someone who identifies as a female, caring, loving, and having an attraction towards another female. While gay stands for a male, or someone identifying as male, having attraction, loving, and being attracted to someone who is also male. Mm-hmm. So that's where the L and the G come from. Mm-hmm. Now the T is where identity comes with. Now the T is transgender. Mm-hmm. And transgender means that it's someone that was biologically born one gender and identifies as the other. So it's a male that identifies as female, or a female that identifies as male. Mm-hmm. And I know that that's something that we'll go into a little bit more in detail, but that's what the T stands for, transgender. Someone that is transitioning from one gender to the other. And the LGBT, the B part of it, is bisexual. And so the bisexual would be someone that feels that they have an attraction towards either male or female, and that they don't feel that they have strictly attraction to one. Mm-hmm. So they wouldn't identify as straight or heterosexual because they're only attracted to the opposite, and they wouldn't identify as gay or bisexual because they're only attracted to the same. Mm-hmm. And then the Q, in some circles, it stands for queer, which is another way of identifying. Mm-hmm. But most know it as questioning. And questioning is just that. It's someone who is in the process of identifying and finding out who they are. Mm-hmm. Questioning can either stand for someone who is questioning their identity as being someone who may be transgender, or questioning their orientation, mm-hmm. their attraction, or their love towards someone else. Mm-hmm. So that's mainly where the LGBT breaks down with.
That's really helpful.
Of course.
Because I'll give you an example of where this comes up in the community. This has happened actually a few times that I'm aware of, where somebody felt they might be transgender, and you know how we have separation in terms of the sexes and who can be viewed, like, so mm-hmm. men are not able to see us without our veils typically. And so if somebody's like they're male and they're mm-hmm. transitioning to becoming female, where are they supposed to sit in the mosque? Can mm-hmm. they sit with women? Can they sit with men? I'm not asking you to answer this question, but these are the kind of mm-hmm. questions that our scholars are trying to tackle, because they just want to consider everybody's interests, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't want to harm anyone, but these are some of the things that our community is trying to navigate. So that's just one example. But I want to dig a little deeper mm-hmm. into what you're talking about and talk to you about something I've heard you talk about before, which is SOGI.
Yes.
And could you explain to us what that is? So
SOGI stands for sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. And when written down, it looks like SOGI, SOGIE. And so what it breaks down to is separate things, like we were talking about identity versus orientation. Mm-hmm. So sexual orientation, and usually when I explain this, I leave sexual orientation to last. Mm-hmm. Is sexual orientation at the beginning, then you have gender identity. And gender identity is when we're looking at someone being transgender. Mm-hmm. Now, one word that's being used a lot, and mainly because we have individuals like Caitlyn Jenner, and we have Laverne Cox, who have come out mm-hmm. and are individuals who are transgender. You'll also hear a word coming out that's called cisgender. Mm-hmm. Now, cisgender means that you feel that you embody the right gender. So cisgender would be on the same side. So if you're born and biologically, you have female parts and you feel as a female, then you're cisgender. Mm-hmm. And then transgender would actually be the opposite of someone crossing. Mm-hmm. So if you're genetically born with female genitalia and then you feel that you are actually a male, then you are transgender because you're actually crossing. Mm-hmm. So it would be transitioning to something, mm-hmm. your true self. The term that I usually use when I'm working with my families and when I'm working with individuals is identifying as their true self, mm-hmm. because when we're looking at identity, gender identity, it's when you close your eyes and you know who your truest, deepest sense you are.
Mm-hmm.
So when I close my eyes, I know that regardless of who I love or how I look, that I am a female. So I am cisgender. Now, if I close my eyes in the truest sense of me, thought, and knew that I was male, then I would be transgender. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the easiest way to explain it is when we close our eyes, who are we? Mm-hmm. So that would be the gender identity. Mm-hmm. Now, the gender expression would be how someone expresses themselves. And I think this is something that kind of like what you were speaking about as far as how you express yourself. We'll look at it. Another word that you're going to find a lot of is heteronormative. Mm-hmm. And heteronormative is the thought and the idea that we are raised in a society that everyone expects you to be straight and everyone expects the individual to dress what their gender is. So girls will wear pink, boys will wear blue. Mm-hmm. You go to prom, a girl wears a dress and a boy wears a tuxedo. And when you are born, your identity is going to be female because you have female genitalia, and you're going to be male because you have male genitalia. So that's what heteronormative is. Mm-hmm. The idea that we come into our space in that frame. And so what happens is when someone expresses themselves differently, I as myself identify as female, yet coming today, I chose to wear a dress shirt and slacks as opposed to wearing a dress. So that is my gender expression. It is what I feel comfortable expressing to the world, how I feel comfortable being in my own body and in my own skin. So that's something important to know because we have some males who may identify as male, but may wear things that individuals may feel maybe more feminine. Mm-hmm. And so that is their expression. Mm-hmm. Say a male wants to wear eyeliner or a female wants to wear a tie. That is expression. It has nothing to do with who they believe themselves they are.
We saw this happen recently with, I don't know him personally to know what he's actually experiencing there, but with the Jaden Smith, right? Mm-hmm. And the fashion photo that came out, and he was wearing women's clothing, what's considered women's clothing.
Exactly.
In another country, actually, it wouldn't be considered women's clothing. But
exactly.
There's a cultural context to it. But I just want to circle back and clarify something that you mentioned, about the way that you're dressing today. Mm-hmm. So, these are the clothes that you feel comfortable in, but you're not also saying at the same time that you feel like a man.
Exactly.
It's just that you're more comfortable in these clothes, right? And so I just want to clarify that because,
of course,
just because somebody might identify pants and a shirt as being more masculine, that doesn't mean that the person feels masculine or male.
And it could be a good example of that is if I held up one hand and I held up another hand, and one would be my identity, who I am, as far as when I close my eyes and I see myself as female, and then the other one would be expression of how I feel comfortable walking around in the world. So the thing is, they're both part of me, but they're both completely separate. My right hand can't be my left hand, and my left hand can't be my right hand, but they're both part of who I am as a person. So that would be an easy way to differentiate. And your right hand will never be your left hand, and your left hand will never be your right hand, but they're still both parts of you. So that's kind of the easiest way to look at what your identity is versus what your expression is. And the last one is sexual orientation. The reason that I leave that as last is because I feel that a lot of times when the topic of LGBT individuals come up or the LGBT community comes up, the first thing that people start thinking about is who are they sleeping with? What are they doing? And the reality is that's probably the smallest part of what SOJ is and what the community is part of. So sexual orientation, and one of the other things is language. So it's identified as sexual orientation versus sexual preference. And the reason for that would be I prefer vanilla over chocolate ice cream. But if you give me a scoop of both, I'm going to eat both. So, but the thing is that when I get to the point where I was in love with someone and falling in love with someone and having a relationship, I didn't prefer one or the other. It was what it was. So when looking at sexual orientation, you look at who does the person feel that they are attracted to? Who do they have that deep connection to? Who do they have those reactions of the sweaty hands, the palpitation of the heart, the butterflies in the stomach, I wish I could say something really cool, but when it comes out, I sound horrible. Mm-hmm. That's what you're looking for when you're looking at orientation, is who's that attraction with? Who does that pull to? Mm-hmm. And in the end of it, there is always, as human beings, we have sexual attractions and we have sexual feelings. But when it comes down to it, and anyone that's in a long-term relationship will tell you that that's part of it, but that's not all of it. Mm-hmm. If anything, it's a small part of what it is. Mm-hmm. It's the companionship, the ability to relate to them, to talk to them. Mm-hmm. And this is something different, because I know a lot of times this come up as like, well, you have best friends that are the same gender, mm-hmm. but it's different. Mm-hmm. I am happily married, mm-hmm. and I am happily married to my wife. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of female friends, but the connection that I feel with her, the ability to connect with her, is different than my other female friends. Mm-hmm. Just like someone that is married may have other and is identifies as heterosexual, straight, say they have other male friends, they're not going to have that same connection as they do with their husband. Mm-hmm. So it comes back to that. It's who is the connection with? Who is that love, that pull? Who makes you want to be with them and wake up with them in the morning, go to bed with them at night? Mm-hmm. So that would be what Soji is. And that's how it breaks down. And within Soji, you have bisexual, lesbian, gay, and one of the ones that is just coming out of right now is pansexual. Mm-hmm. Pansexual is someone that will fall in love with an individual regardless of gender. Mm-hmm. And so that isn't what they see. Mm-hmm. They fall in love with someone's heart. Mm-hmm. They associate them with their person and who that person is. Mm-hmm. And this is identified a little differently than bisexual, because bisexual will look at either male or female. Mm-hmm. But someone who is pansexual is open to dating someone who is transgender, is open mm-hmm. to dating someone that is transitioning from male to female, which in the community is MTF. In the community is MTF, mm-hmm. or female to male, which is FTM. So they're open to dating anybody. Mm-hmm. It's the connection that they're looking for.
But I just want to clarify, because unfortunately, when people are uncomfortable, mm-hmm. Discussing these issues, and we know that no matter what issues they're uncomfortable with, sometimes people will resort to saying negative things about them and mm-hmm. making fun and, microaggressions.
Yes.
And so when it comes to pansexualism, we're talking about human beings,
mm-hmm.
because this is what I hear young kids sometimes saying, is that it also includes like animals and things like that. Mm-hmm. And, just so it's very, very clear for people, I just want them to understand this. So that's not including. No. It just includes people.
When you're looking at when we're looking at all of this, when we're looking at anything within the LGBT community, you're looking at how someone identifies as an individual, how mm-hmm. they feel their true self is, and the other individual that they love. Mm-hmm. The other individual that they feel a connection with. For lesbians, it will be someone identified as female. For individuals that are identified as gay, it'll be someone that is male. For someone that is pansexual, it is another person that, regardless of gender or how they identify, that they fall in love with the person, the personality. When we look at any type of attraction, when we look at any type of attraction, it's something that connects us to that other individual on a deeper sense.
So I know one question that's going to come up then is, well, so then what is the difference between somebody who's pansexual mm-hmm. and bisexual?
So it may be the ability to define self. Mm-hmm. Some people will feel that pansexual fits them better. And some people feel that they are only attracted to males or females, and they wouldn't maybe attracted to someone who is transgender. Mm-hmm. I think throughout this entire conversation, one of the best things to realize, especially when working with family, when working in a clinical sense, is that we're trying to find a way to be able to assist them in identifying themselves so that they're able to feel good and understand who they are.
Right.
So some people
having
identify.
That awareness
exactly
to start with is a place to start.
Yes.
And then we can go from there, like just understanding mm-hmm. where the person is. Okay. So this is great. I need to take a break for our sponsors, so we'll be right back.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Welcome back to Muslims and Mental Health. Today we are discussing how to talk to our youth who identify as LGBT or T or Q. And I'm happily joined by Erica Rodriguez, who is a marriage and family therapist. And we're going to continue on now with talking about what do we know about how these identities develop.
Okay.
Is there a particular age? Is there a developmental period?
Okay. So I think one of the first things that we want to be able to kind of review before we start again is that we're going to be looking at two different things.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at orientation, who someone loves, cares for, connection, and we're going to be looking at identity, who someone is. And it's important to look at these two topics separately because when we're looking at developmental stages, we're going to see that they develop in different time frames.
Okay.
Now, the Children's National Medical Center Outreach Program produced a publication, a guide for parents, and it said that gender variant youth, which is a youth who varies from the gender that they were born with. So say a youth that is born male with male biology, it starts to be variant, wants to wear dresses, be a princess. Individuals like that by the age of as young as 3 start being able to identify who they are. And again, this is very separate from who they are attracted to. One of the biggest things that we struggle with is that when we're talking about identity, people say, well, how can he know if he's gay? He's only 5. And the thing is, we're not looking at who they love at that point because no one knows. They probably love Spider-Man. They probably love Batman or Anna or one of the princesses. So at that point, we're looking at who they are. Youth as early as 3 years old are able to begin looking at their identity, and their identity is solidified by around the ages of 5 and 6. So by 5 or 6, a child is able to tell you, I'm a boy, I'm a girl. They're able to begin looking at the difference of skin color, ethnicity. So at that point, they've been able to identify more of self, of core self. So that's the first thing that we want to look at is identity. Identity forms as early as 3 and solidifies around 5 or 6. So that's the first thing that we want to be able to see. We also want to know that when looking at this and looking at identity, that there's 2 different things that we want to express. We want to look at cognitively and we want to look at socially. So cognitively is how the child is able to process things, and socially how the child interacts outside, how they interact in their environment with their parents, with their friends. So at the age of between 3 or 6, socially and emotionally, children develop a sense of self-concept and a sense of gender and racial identity, like I was able to explain earlier. And cognitively, they are able to begin with memory. Their attention span starts lengthening a little, looking at symbolic thinking and improvement in language. So this is when you start getting the youth persistently telling you, but I'm a girl, or this is wrong, pointing to their genitalia, or why am I not like sister? And I think one of the biggest struggles that we often have is that they say, well, maybe it's a stage. And when we talk about how to support your youth, we can actually talk about that a little more. I think that the biggest thing to understand is that we're looking for someone that's persistent, consistent, and insistent. Persistent is that they're always letting you know. Consistent is that it doesn't change. And insistent to a point where they're children that want to cut off their own genitalia or that cry because they insist that they're not a girl and don't want to wear a dress. And so this is what we're looking at.
So that's a good point that you're bringing up. What are some of the types of expressions that you've come across in your experience of how kids do express this? So, like, that was new to me what you just said. They would say this is wrong.
Yes.
Okay.
So we've been able to identify that, and we've actually seen in the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, and there is also a gender project that supports youth very young, from 3 and up, 3.5 and up, who have seen them do things like tell you I'm a girl, or they'll draw pictures of themselves, and they'll draw their picture of a family, but they're in a dress, because that's how you express that you're a girl or a boy when you're young. You're in a dress or you're in pink. And this isn't something about saying that if a child wants to wear a dress one day or wants to wear a duck costume for a week, eventually they'll get over it. They'll keep going, but it won't be something that's so crucial to them that they don't want to move past it. And this isn't just a week or a day. You'll see this as something that's consistent over weeks, over months, even years. And I think when we start looking at when orientation and other things start to develop, because after 5 and 6, you're around 7 to 10, you see that youth started being able to either internalize it and say, the people around me don't say this, so obviously there's something wrong with me. And so they start internalizing it. Or you'll start seeing youth that are depressed, that are rebellious. There's also been times where we've seen that they try to be hyper masculine, hyper feminine, to try to almost prove to themselves that they're wrong, what they feel. And you'll see that a lot.
When you say rebellious, you mean in a self-destructive way?
In a self-destructive way. And one of the things that we'll probably get into a little later is like the statistics. There's horribly negative statistics on LGBT individuals. And right now we're just looking at identity and the T part of it. Haven't even gotten to the LGBT part.
Right.
So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at how a youth identifies who they feel they are. Something is continued pictures of drawing of the different gender, of insisting that something's wrong with them. Or I've even heard families who have been religious that they'll tell their parents God made a mistake. Or kids that have pointed back to their mother's belly and said, I want to go back, I wasn't finished. Because they feel that they weren't born in the right body.
Oh, the kids are saying this. Okay, I think that the parents were
No. So the children will say, I want to go back in your belly because I came out wrong. There have been instances where families have found boys in the bathroom with scissors, trying to cut off their genitalia because it felt wrong. They know it's not right. And again, this isn't just something that just comes and goes. This is insistent, consistent, persistent. Dr. Joel Osteen is an amazing, amazing doctor, medical doctor through the Children's Hospital. And she speaks all the time about those 3 things. And if you're able to identify those 3 things, then it's something that should be explored or at least not put down. And that's something that, again, we can talk about the difference between rejecting behaviors and accepting behaviors and what support looks like as opposed to not supporting. And then, so this is all just identity. So once we move past this stage, around as early as 10 through about 12, you start having individuals begin to identify attraction. This is the age where kids start punching girls, the whole the yard. They'll punch someone, they'll punch someone in the recess, or they'll start writing little love notes, or girls will start writing, their names with someone else's last name, or giggle in packs. This is what we normally see. And so around 10, 12 and up, you'll start looking at what attraction is, who they want to have a relationship with, who they want to hold hands with. And this was when orientation starts to form, different completely from identity. So by then they know if they're a girl or a boy, and then now they're learning who they love, who they have an attraction to, who they start giggling with when they walk around. And again, by this point, they're also looking at, if you look through Erickson's stages of development, you also see this is where they're trying to find who they are. And around 11 to 14, cognitively, the brain develops in areas of youth's ability to think, their ability to learn, reason, and remember. And this is important because they're able to learn what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. They're able to reason, should I say I like Johnny if my name is Tommy? And they're able to remember concrete things about what people said about others. So this is a time where they start learning who they are, and they're also able to understand a clear difference of what's right and what's wrong. So if my family, they say that being gay is wrong, at this point I'm able to solidify and understand that to a point where I need to either internalize and hold it or do something away from it. And this is where you find the substance use, the self-harm behavior, the suicidality starts coming in. This is also where you get a lot of bullying.
Because they can't make congruent the self-state of the inner self with the outer self.
So the internalized message of I'm wrong, something's wrong with me. And it's now has to be internalized, and then they have to deal with a lot of that struggle themselves. And this
it sounds like, so parents will need to tread cautiously about expressing the beliefs of theology without completely overshadowing getting to know their child. It seems like a very fine point. Yeah.
It's definitely hard. We have definitely worked with, within a project that I used to working with LGBT youth. When we worked with families who were religious, we never told them your religion is wrong, because who am I to say that? I don't know what it gives them. I don't know, what it means to their life. So I have no way of telling you you're wrong. That's not my place. But what I can do is assist you in how to use language to support the youth as an individual. Of remembering that you love them before you found this out and that the child hasn't changed.
Right.
That's completely different. So if we go back to orientation.
Yeah, it really is. The child hasn't changed. What's changed is new information.
And if anything, you know your child better now because they trusted you enough to come out.
Right.
And coming out is a process of self-identifying. They've been able to trust you enough to come out. So now what you have is you have your whole child instead of just pieces of your child. Now you have that great ability to continue to learn your child in the fullest sense. And that's something that sometimes is lost with families and parents and different things. And one of the other things that I think is missed a lot is that individuals, when they come out, actually go through their own mourning process. Because a lot of times, I'll use myself as an example, I thought I was killing my mother's dreams, my father's dreams of a wedding, of grandchildren. In the traditional sense, I was. So as someone who cared about her family, there was a mourning process. So that's the thing. It's like you have to fight within yourself and mourn within yourself. And then on top of that, to be able to get rejection and negative thoughts and being able to see through a heteronormative society that you're wrong is hard.
Now, was that something you were able to articulate at the time, or was this just upon reflection that you realized that you went through that process?
It's something that, I knew I was sad. And the sadness and the guilt, especially if you're looking at this age, if you're looking at an age of 11 through 14, when we're looking at what your urges to have independence and be with peers, but at the same time, you still love family, you still want to be connected to where you come from. You know what fear looks like. You know what guilt feels like. You know what it feels like to let your parents down, what it feels like to let yourself down. So at this age, I'm able to reflect and say that encompasses a mourning process. Back then, it was just pure emotion.
Right.
I couldn't process those emotions until later and make sense of them. At that point, I just felt those emotions and had to live with them. And in part, I felt I should live with them because it's my fault. And that's one of the things that when looking into how you support your youth, whatever happens, a lot of times youth internalize it and say it's because I'm bad, because it's my fault if I wasn't gay. And that's one of the biggest things is that when we're looking at cognitively, this is something that develops as everything else. Identity comes and then orientation comes.
Is there anything else you wanted to say about that before we move on? I just want to be mindful of time.
Oh, yeah. I think the biggest thing when looking at understanding is that these are labels that are used to assist in being able to have a better understanding as an individual and as someone to say, this is my place in the world, this is how I identify, this is how I express myself, this makes sense. But when it comes down to it, it's still the individual. It's still someone who as social creatures, we want to have that connection with others. I want to be your friend. As friends, we have a different connection than I may have to my spouse. But because I identify within the community doesn't mean that I'm different. Just like youth, when they identify or when they come out and express themselves, at the base of it, they're still people. Everyone is just an adult or a child or someone, an individual wanting that connection. And I think we need to be able to reflect on that. It's good to learn these labels. I think it assists. I think it's good to learn how it breaks down, but to not forget that when it comes down to it, this is an individual who has feelings, who has a heart, who wants the same things as everyone else, to be successful in a way that makes them happy and to be part of a greater community.
The last question I want to ask around this first part is, what are the current theories saying about these identities, and are they biological, environmentally influenced, socially influenced, all the above?
So there's a couple of different things that are going on right now, depending from who writes it. I can tell you that for sure that all the medical, psychological agencies have at this point rejected any type of therapy or therapy to try to reconvert someone. So all that has been taken away because they're looking at it as a biological. Now the gay gene or the transgender gene has yet to be found.
Okay.
So we haven't been able to say X1532 if you have this missing, you identify as gay or transgender. That has yet to be found. But there has been some studies regarding number of births that that a female has, the higher likelihood of them having a gay child, especially a gay male child. There has been studies with twins of how a high percentage of twins identify in the same orientation. I myself have a twin sister, and she also identifies as a lesbian. So I usually use that as saying, well, look, I think the biggest difference is when looking at other theories is sociologically how it's accepted. And just kind of a little bit of that is that since we do live in a heteronormative society, a lot of what happens is what's influenced by what is being put out there. Other societies that identify a third gender, that identify it as being okay for you to be gay or transgender, may have a higher instance because the society is more open to it. So,
well, that and some there are other things going on, right? So, for example, what you'll hear in pop media is Iran is often referred to because they allow transgender surgeries, and it's an Islamic country. But there's a lot more to unpack around that in Iran because of the misogyny that exists there, and the lack of ability for women to move freely and upward mobility and so forth. And so sometimes you will see people opting for that surgery because of the misogyny, not necessarily because of identification. So there's a lot more to unpack in other cultures, but yeah, here I believe, right, even the insurance now is moving towards covering if people are opting for surgery.
So there's a whole process of transitioning. There's a social transition. There's a self transition. You have to be come out to yourself, and that sometimes can be hard. Especially if there's like internalized homophobia, when we see the hypermasculinity and the hyperfemininity. So when you come out to self, then there's coming out to those close to you. Usually we come out to those we trust first. And then there is so that's the families, close friends transition. Then there is social transition. So you start identifying, living as the gender that you identify as. Then there is medical transition, which is you start taking hormones. If you're female and you want to go transition to male, you take testosterone and take hormone blockers, so you're no longer getting female hormones released into your system. And then lastly, there's surgical. And surgical is the gender reassignment surgery. So there's a lot of different stages of transitioning, but at this point, there are medical insurances that will assist with having that transition take place. Being able to pay for hormones, being able to, Children's Hospital, I've mentioned a lot, has one of the best programs in the country to assist with young adults who are now in the process of transitioning.
So I just want to circle back for a second
course.
and say that Iran is not the only place where misogyny exists. We have misogyny everywhere, and it's actually one of the things that the Prophet Muhammad talked about in his last sermon that he gave was the challenge of women and children, looking out for their rights and advocating for them. So I just want to mention that. But I want to stop this particular episode at this point and transition into our fun questions that we like to ask our interviews. And then, we are going to continue with the part 2 on how you can actually talk with your children or how you can best assist them. And we'll be getting to that in the following week. But right now we're going to talk about the fun questions. So who is your hero if you have one and why?
So my hero would probably be my parents and my grandparents. My grandparents immigrated here from Mexico and brought my mother, my uncle, and also my parents because they're very hardworking. My mom was a secretary and moved up in the school system to be able to assist him to registrar things and work with youth. And my father has been a mechanic for his entire life and has assisted putting 3 kids through college and has always given us the strength to continue with our education. My sister and I both have our masters. We're both going for our doctorate. So really my parents are my heroes. My family is my hero.
That's lovely. Thank you. And what is your favorite concept and why?
Concept. I really, I guess when I think of concept, the thing that I think most of is treat others how you want to treat yourself. Mm-hmm. I think that would be my biggest thing if I look at it like a life concept, like the whole golden rule, because working with homeless young adults, working with immigrant families, working with gang members, I find a lot of times we hit that wall where people have stopped treating them as people and started treating them as what the stigma is. Mm-hmm. And if you treat someone how you want to treat yourself, then you have the ability to really learn who they are. Mm-hmm. And I think that I've always been drawn to try to help those who have found themselves stuck in those stigmas and try to see them through the eyes of people, of individuals, and treat them how I wish someone would treat me. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the concept that when looking at a concept, I guess that would be it.
Mm-hmm. And how about your favorite word?
Oh, my favorite word, relentless. If I have to pick one, I like relentless. Because sometimes when going to something, for something, when trying to finish a dissertation, you need to be relentless. You need to be able to have that power to say, keep going even when you don't want to or when you feel you can't. Mm-hmm. You need to be relentless in your pursuit for justice, for truth, for love, for strive for yourself. Mm-hmm. You need to be relentless in it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So,
Thank you.
Of course.
Well, this concludes another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. We're so happy that you joined us today, and you can contact us with any of your feedback, your comments, your concerns at nafshealertherapy@gmail.com. That's NAFSHEALER therapy@gmail.com. Thank you.